The jury meeting together in the headquarters of the BBVA Foundation in Madrid has resolved to grant the BBVA Foundation Frontiers of Knowledge Award in the Economics, Finance, and Management category in its 16th edition to Partha Dasgupta of the University of Cambridge. Partha Dasgupta has done pioneering work on the interaction between economic life and the natural environment, including biodiversity. His article with Jeffrey Heel, The Optimal Depletion of Exhaustible Resources in the early 70s, defined the field of environmental economics by providing a basis for an analysis of how societies with a fixed quantity of depletable resources should allocate resources over time and invest in alternative technologies. His work on population has helped the understanding of trade-offs between population size and standards of living, and inspired subsequent research on poverty, fertility, and the natural environment. Partha Dasgupta provided conceptual foundations for the definition and measurement of sustainable development in economies where market prices undervalue the social value of nature because of pervasive externalities. In contrast with measures of well-being based on flows, such as GDP, Dasgupta proposed measuring sustainable development as the change in the accounting value of total wealth, which includes natural capital. These ideas have provided a framework for green accounting, which is now widely adopted for measuring sustainable development.
What have been the fundamental contributions for your work to eliminating the interactions between economic life and the natural environment?
Well, that's a hard question that you have asked, which is what I regard as to be my fundamental contribution in bringing nature into economics. It's really for others to judge. But the work that I've done, which has pleased me most in terms of making me understand something better than before, is in recognizing that the human economy is not separate from nature. It is part of nature. It is embedded in nature. And this distinction between being external to nature and being embedded in nature is absolutely fundamental. And I've had to, in effect, reconstruct macroeconomics of development and the economics of poverty by regarding the human economy as embedded in nature. That, I think, is the insight that has most pleased me.
Could you explain what your research has revealed about how societies should interact with natural goods and processes in order to avoid their depletion?
It's a very hard question to answer in a very simple way, because when I used the term human economy before, in my previous answer, I included in the human economy households, communities, cities, villages, regions, nations, and the world as a whole. So you pick and choose. Depending on the unit that you wish to study, the unit of the economy that you wish to study, the problems it faces when it goes about its work depends on the scale you're looking at, whether it's a household or a community or so. But at each moment, there is a collective action problem. What each person wants to do on his own might differ from what should ideally happen if the community or the economic unit in question is to succeed. So my work in recent years has investigated the embeddedness of the economy in nature from the perspective of each of these levels. And that has given me very many insights regarding how they should measure to access their success or failure of their activities, how they should measure economic success, whether it should be income or whether it should be wealth, and if it's wealth, what should be included in wealth. And of course you know the answer, which is that you must include nature as part of your wealth, not just produced capital and human capital.
How has incorporating natural capital in economic models of wealth modified the way they measure sustainable development?
That's again a very, very good question. The way it modifies the way, including nature, the way including nature modifies the way we should assess sustainable development, is that it points to the fact that what you should be considering is the wealth of the economy. And remember, the economy could be a household, or it could be a community, or it could be a nation, or the world as a whole. So if somebody says, are we on a sustainable development path? Don't ask whether GDP is increasing, because it will tell you nothing. Ask instead whether the wealth of the economy is increasing. And in that measure of wealth, it will include nature as part of your wealth, the ecosystems that you are using for your purposes. So sustainable development should ideally mean that this inclusive notion of wealth increases over time, does not decline. That's sustainable development.
Looking to the future, what steps should the international community adopt to preserve our planet's natural capital, and what incentives should be introduced to achieve this goal?
Well, the most important thing that the world should be concerned with is to try and value nature, the various ecosystems it's using, because in private calculations, that valuation is going to be very important, and in public deliberations as well. Without an understanding of the value, putting some quantitative estimates, the way you value houses, the way you value machines, you need to value natural capital, nature's ecosystems. If you don't do that, you're in trouble. Now, valuing doesn't mean market value. I'm talking about social worth. And there has been many studies done trying to estimate the value of various forms of natural capital, various forms of ecosystems, whether it could be mangroves, it could be coral reefs, it could be forest, it could be woodlands, it could be wetlands, and so forth. Okay? You need to bring those studies together and then decide what policies need to be enacted in order to be able to sustain their integrity. Some of these will be taxes, taxing pollution, for example. Some will be subsidies, subsidizing people to invest in ecosystems so that the ecosystems grow. Okay? And then at the international level, since your question was about the international level, it's the management of global common property resources, global public goods, that's really important. At the moment, we speak mostly about climate, and so the ability of the atmosphere to absorb carbon dioxide and other compounds of carbon to keep down global warming. But there are other great public goods, like the oceans, the open seas, which are public goods because without them we are dead. And yet we treat them as free goods. The open seas nobody pays to travel across it. All the trillions of dollars of merchandise that are sailing across the oceans and polluting it, they don't pay any rent. So we ought to be collecting rents from it to bring down the impact we have on the oceans. And the other management problem we have is over the tropical rainforests. They are public goods, global public goods. They give us enormous number of services, but they are not open access. They belong to national jurisdictions. And so the incentive on countries which are home to these rainforests are lower than the total incentives of humanity, which is one reason why they're being cut down all the time and being replaced by plantations and cattle ranches. And so we need to have a mechanism by which we pay these countries not to do that. They will charge us. It'll be like compensation for preserving these forests. And one proposal I had, and I've talked about it a lot in public, is the idea of instituting a new international institution, a sister to the World Bank, for example, which will be mandated to be able to manage the oceans, charge for it, and perhaps use that to negotiate with countries which house the rainforests and pay them not to cut them down in the way they are doing now. So in some ways, it's a self-financing proposition, and it solves two problems in one go, which is to protect the oceans and protect the rainforests.